I imagine over the years I've been involved with this, which began back in the early 1950s, I have examined, to some extent, over 1,000 cases that have been brought to my attention. Many hundreds of them occurred. At the time, I had a large photo exhibit on tour of malls throughout this country and Canada, the island of Guam, as a result of some advertising I did. And this exhibit which I created was put on display in malls, shopping malls, so that people could be walking by, going to buy some shoes, and instead of that they'd see a picture that they resembled something they had seen, maybe. And so I would walk over to them, standing there pointing to that thing, you know, and I'd say, "Have you ever seen what you thought was a UFO?" And amazingly, an awful lot of people told me they thought they had. Well, that's about as scientific as you can get about this. I think I saw something that I can't explain. And then I asked them the details, and I put it on tape. And I have in some boxes nearby all of those audio tapes, over 800 of them actually, which describe experiences that people have had, which we refer to as the UFO experience. During the 12 years that I traveled with that photo exhibit, for which I, of course, charged a fee of the malls to try to raise money for the organization to help pay our bills for this research work we were doing, which cost money. And I had occasion to speak to some very interesting people. I met professors, housewives, school kids, doctors, people of all walks of life. And people come from all those walks of life gave me stories and incidents in their lives that they couldn't explain, having seen either anything from a ball of light to a structured object, to a cigar-shaped object, to a discoid-shaped object, to a sphere. No doors, no windows. I had one conversation. I remember a man in in Washington, near Seattle, who was working at the Boeing aircraft company's plant. And he said he was at his home, and they lived on a slope of a mountain. And they could look down and see the plant and the buildings in a row down there. He said one time he was outside, his wife inside, looking out the window, and he was out there in the yard and saw something moving toward them. It was a daytime experience. He said it was disc-shaped, and it had a row of what appeared to be windows around the one edge of it that it was facing him, and he could see motion behind those windows. It's as if there were people or beings inside looking out at him. And it hovered there temporarily and then gradually moved away and suddenly sped off and went down to the plant and hovered over the building at the end of a row of buildings over the Boeing plant. And then it raised and went off. He turned and asked his wife if she had seen what he had seen. And she said yes, she had. She didn't want to come out. Another incident I recall was a woman, this was up in Canada, matter of fact, in a mall up there, and she happened to be going by and was curious about some of the things. I approached her and we had a conversation. She was concerned about my religious orientation. She wondered why I would be doing something that was so representative of the devil. And I said, well, I don't regard this as a representation of the devil. She said, oh yes it is. She said, these wouldn't be seen here if it weren't that in our environment. I said, well, that's your opinion, but I don't have that opinion. The next day she came back. She had a book of poetry, religious poetry, and she stood there in the aisle and read this poetry to me, trying to save my soul. And I've had preachers approach me and try to do the same thing. I've had college professors stand there and look at me and say, you guys will believe in anything, and walk away in a huff and won't even talk to me. I've had others who tell me that they know how these work and where they're produced. I've had people tell me that they've been off in them on trips, looking back at the earth. All kinds of strange stories. But I've heard other stories that are a little bit more believable, maybe, if you can accept some of the odd aspects of this subject. But of the literally tens of thousands of people that I saw in 95 malls over a 12-year period, getting away from my work when I could, for anywhere from a weekend to a week at a time, I saw a cross-section of the population, everywhere from Canada to Puerto Rico to the island of Guam. They spoke English everywhere but Puerto Rico. They had quite a bit of Spanish down there, and we took some reports in Spanish. People were seeing essentially the same group of phenomena. The same type of stuff seems to be seen worldwide. Now, what does it represent? Do I believe in that stuff? I've had people ask me, do you believe in all this stuff? I said, well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was something to it. Now, either of these things are real as people describe them, or there's something very important in the minds of people that we should be examining, because they're all telling the same strange stories. And if that's the case, then why don't the psychiatrists get busy with us and examine this stuff? Because some of the people from whom I take these reports are greatly relieved when they've had a chance to tell it to someone who will not laugh at them. I've had women tell me they've never told their husbands. I've had husbands tell me they've never told their family because of the loss of self-esteem.